So the other day, Whoopi Goldberg on her show The View said that black people in America have it just as bad as people in Iran. Right now, anybody with a sane mind would know that's a pretty ridiculous statement to say. Right. And in my opinion, this is the reason why you got a lot of people on the left struggling to connect with a lot of Americans, because when you have people on The View that say things like this, it obviously you lose a lot of credibility. People look at you and say like, okay, what are you talking about? But you have people like Whoopi Goldberg and many people and other women on The View, especially a lot of women that watch this show, and they obviously influence a lot of people. But when you hear things like this, like the more and more people hear statements like this being said, people get to a point where it says like, all right, that's obviously a nonsensical statement, and people know, and people like Bill Maher also understand that this hurts the Democratic Party. All right, so we're gonna listen to what Bill Maher says, because he talks about this, and he talks about how Democrats need to do something about The View, because they're saying a lot of things that just make absolutely no sense. So let's hear what he had to say, then I'll share my thoughts.
What did you think of Whoopi Goldberg saying it's worse to be a black person in America today than a woman in Iran? I see we were talking about the trans issue before, and the New York Times really has come over on that to the sort of the sensible, liberal, not crazy woke position. I think this is a great first step toward getting the Democrats back to sanity, and a second good step would be, we got to do something about The View. I really believe that. I mean, could you just
it's huge in Iran, though.
What did you think of?
And that's the thing. Like it is crazy. Like The View, when you say things like that, it's just like, yo, what people say like, all right, what are you talking about, right? And Democrats need to do something, because when I hear things like Whoopi Goldberg, when they say stuff like, all right, blacks here in America have it just as bad as like you said, I think women in Iran. It's like, are you serious? Have you been to Iran? Like, I've never been to Iran, but the things that you hear, like women have much less freedoms that they have here in the United States. Like, you talk about women, the way they act here in the United States with their sexual freedom, liberation, and the way that they talk. Like, women can't get away with that over in Iran. And for people like Whoopi Goldberg, right? And this is the problem that I have. People like Whoopi Goldberg and had this mindset, especially this victim mentality. They like to pick apart they always like to talk about the bad of America, right? Like, no country is innocent, right? No country is is without flaws, right? But people like her always like to pick the bad parts of America, and without talking about all the good that America has to offer. Okay, because no country is perfect. But if you're someone that always looks at the negative when it comes to America, then you're always going to have this critique about America and make it seem like America is a really bad place to live, when you have so many people trying to get over to America. Okay, and when you have this mindset and of saying blacks have it just as bad as people in America, it's just like, okay, is that like, where do you get that from? Like. And her reasons for saying that made absolutely no sense. She talks about murder. Like, okay, murder doesn't only happen in America. It happens everywhere in the world, right? That's not a good enough reasoning, right? When you talk about rights, like, you could just make the comparison of rights as, like, if you're a woman in Iran, like, my gosh, I'm sure they would love to have the freedoms that women have here in America, right? And not only that, but you, Whoopi Goldberg, being a multi-millionaire, how many women do you know in Iran that are multi-millionaires, or even have the opportunity to be a multi-millionaire, right? But you, Whoopi Goldberg, are here talking on the show, being able to make money the way you do. A lot of women don't have that opportunity, especially the way women dress over there, and they're required to dress. You can dress however you want, Whoopi Goldberg, and nobody's gonna say anything. But yet you say something like that, and don't speak for all black people, because a lot of black people don't feel that way, right? Because if you ask any black people where you want to live, you rather live in the United States, or would you want to go live in Iran? I'm pretty sure majority of them, if not all of them, are going to say, yeah, I'll stay here in America. And no black person gonna say, yeah, I'd rather live in Iran. Just not going to happen. So it makes no sense to say that they have it just as bad, because it's a really dumb thing, a naive thing to say, because that's clearly just not a choice. That's not something that's built on reality. But of course, Whoopi Goldberg, she likes to say a lot of things where she just talks, doesn't know what she's talking about, right? She doesn't explain things well, right? But she always likes to come at this from an angle of this victim mentality where, you know, black people have it so bad here in America, where it's just like, my goodness, like, are you serious? Like, there's so many successful black people in this country, right? And if and I think a lot of black people, whether you're struggling or not, or you're not where you want when it comes to success, if you look at all the people that are doing well in this country, why don't you try to put in the effort and try to, you know, make sure that you're putting yourself in a position to make the right choices in life, where therefore you can have the opportunity to go there and build success for yourself. But obviously that doesn't. The first thing black people need to start focusing on is trying to raise children in 2-parent households, because I think that's the biggest issue when it comes to blacks in America, right? Because blacks have all the rights. Like, that's not an issue. Blacks have the rights. Black people can do whatever they want to do in terms of building success for themselves. However, when you have children being raised in single-parent households, we already know statistics when it comes to, you know, success rates, right? We know children have a less chance of making sure that they're staying out of trouble, right? Not getting locked up in jail, not having children out of wedlock when they're raised in a single parent household. So if you want to improve the chances of success in the black community, you want to make sure at the very least that children are being raised with a mother and a father. And we all know that that's not happening, which is obviously, you see that is one of the biggest reasons why so many black people are struggling here. It's not because of the lack of rights. That's just clearly not it, right? I know there's things that happened in the past, but, you know, 2025, we don't have to worry about those things. And of course, Whoopi Goldberg likes to bring the past, you know, to the present and say that, oh, you know, back then, you know, this happened. Like, we're talking about today, 2025, where those things are just not happening anymore. Okay, you could pick apart the past of any country, you know, and you'll find bad things. If you want to look for it, you can find it. But in 2025, blacks have the opportunity to build success for them if they just make the right choices. So to make that comparison that, you know, blacks have it just as bad as Iran is obviously just not true. So, not true for me, anyways, right? And any black person I know, it's not true for them as well. So, you know, like Bill Maher said, man, Democrats got to do something about this, because, you know, if you're going to have, you know, people like The View espousing stuff like this, all it does is just destroys the credibility of the Democratic Party, because we already see the Democratic Party. We see their ratings, right? Their approval ratings. Like, people do not trust the Democratic Party. They don't believe in them. They don't believe in their leadership. They don't believe that they have a plan to make America, you know, better for them. And you see why people just, you know, can't really get to a point where they're trusting them and say that, you know what, I have trust in the Democratic Party. And we know why, because you have a lot of people like Whoopi Goldberg and many people on The View that have this crazy idea of like all the negatives in America. Like, so many people are oppressed here in the United States, when it's just not true, right? So, I think Democrats definitely, you know, Bill Maher's right when they say the Democrats got to do something about it, because, you know, you can't keep saying ridiculous things like that, things that just aren't true. So those are my thoughts. Interested to hear your thoughts. Make sure you leave a comment down below, hit the like button, share, and if you haven't done so, then make sure to subscribe. So guys, take care, have a good one. Later.